It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, and all things about how you can have a secure and sexy relationship. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre. Hey, Andre.
Hey, Tara.
Hey,
hello, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with Tara and Andre.
Mm-hmm.
In this episode, we are going to reflect on our recent experience doing the 36 questions that might lead to love.
Yeah.
So this was developed out of a 1997 study. We will tell you a bit more about it in a bit, but we're going to also share about what we thought was missing from the list, because we think there's some key things missing that would be good to find out before getting into a serious relationship or moving in with someone, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of this came in part by someone who contacted me and asked me for any advice or my opinions about their wanting to move in with somebody. So the scenario is that it's kind of like they love each other. They think they love each other. They've only been going out for a short time. They are infatuated with each other, call it what you will. But it happens that the circumstances are that one person's place is not being up for renewal and the other person has space in their house. So why not move in? Yeah, you're like, right. So would they be prompted to move in at this point now if it wasn't for those circumstances? And also the idea for me is, well, how long have you known each other? Have you gone at least once around the sun? Is it still part of the honeymoon phase, or is it, just the infatuation? What is it? And maybe it's going to work out. Some people, it does work out perfectly fine. But I always say also, it's easier to move in than it is to move out, right?
That's
so
true.
Yeah, there's a sexy invitation. Hey, come move in with me. It'll be swimming and everything. But what happens if it does go south? And then how do you
extract yourself?
Exactly, right? But what can we do then to kind of explore that so it doesn't go south? Or maybe we know the person, get to know the person a little bit before that happens, or in general, finding somebody, a mate, would this be a good person for me? And some of these questions will explore that. And some of these questions, well, the study we're going to look at, the first study, actually suggests that you might fall in love with the person simply by asking these.
Yeah.
And then we kind of go further with that and say, well, in addition to those questions, what about the people who are already in love in long-term relationships? And can you rekindle love and, always get to know more about the other person?
We can. And I think we did. We heard some news stories and that sort of thing. But I want to go back to what you were saying about the situation that was presented to yourself. You mentioned a friend, said that they were going to be moving in with someone and the circumstances. And I didn't actually realize that was their circumstances. And I smiled because I, in fact, was in that circumstance and chose, after a very short period of time of really not really knowing that person, out of convenience, moving in with them and their two kids. Now it lasted 7 years, but I think there was points along that journey where I was questioning whether or not that was the right decision at that time, because I didn't really know them that well, even though I was in still that infatuation phase and that sort of thing. So yeah. So
that brings to mind a question. So you say, we say, is it going to work out? Is it a good relationship or not? But I wonder what our expectation is that, what's the measure of a good relationship? Does it mean that if it went 7 years, but now you're no longer living with that person, that it failed? Or do we say, well, it was a good 7-year run? So when we do start a relationship, is there an expectation, well, this is going to last forever, even if we happen to be open in the relationship? And, I think back to some relationships that I might have had. There's one in particular I'm thinking that we worked out very well. We liked each other very much, but they wanted to have children and I did not want to. But other than that, I think we probably might have still continued to see each other. But now they are not necessarily wanting to remain in contact. I get that. They're wanting it. But what about the idea that we did have all this good chemistry, we did have all this good rapport, but now because we went different things and we go separate ways, what happens to the value of that relationship? And how do we measure that? Like, does it have this idea that it could only be successful if it's continuous till we die, or,
Yeah, I totally get that. And I'm not saying it wasn't a successful relationship, and it was. I think that I didn't know certain things, and then there were certain things that bothered me throughout that relationship that we hadn't talked about. And you made a good point about having children, and we missed that in the list. So maybe we'll do some amendments between now and releasing it to all of you. So yeah.
But
so I want.
Well, so that's a good segue, because you say that you might not have known certain things about them. And here we're going to try and look into some of the things that we might want to know prior to it.
But before we jump in, even though we jumped in already, maybe we should introduce ourselves to people who don't know us, or maybe listening to us for the first time.
Who are you?
I am Tara Lynn Franco. I am a relationship and awesomeness coach.
And I am Andre Turcotte. I'm a registered psychotherapist, sex-positive psychotherapist.
Yeah. And our passion is to help people create amazing relationships, secure. We usually focus on non-monogamous relationships, although a lot of the advice we give does expand beyond all relationships. In fact, this particular podcast, I think, would apply to any style of relationship. But part of what we love to do is help you navigate some of those tough things that may come up in those relationships from time to time, and have deeper conversations about what's going on in your relationship. And we do this through advice here on the podcast. We have a Let's Talk Polyamory private Facebook group, and
it's good.
And we share some free resources like we are today. And then we also have programs and services like our coaching and therapy services and our programs, our group program and our Poly Newbies digital course.
Indeed, we do.
So those are some of the things we do. So let's start a little bit with background in case people aren't familiar with the 36 questions about where they came from.
Right. So Arthur Aron and Associates, I think back in 1997, created these 36 questions for people who might be on a first or second date early in the relationship, as opposed to simply just going out and kind of, having small talk or whatever, that we might be well served if we were to get to know the person who it is. And we might be able to find out, is there enough interest for us to want to pursue this? And if there was some interest, might we even fall in love by getting to know more about the person? So they developed these series of questions. And as we mentioned earlier, these are 36, but we've added, later on we'll get to that, we've added some questions to see just how compatible we might be and to get to know each other more.
Yeah. And in fact, their study was really about seeing if two strangers could fall in love by asking a specific set of questions. And they published their study in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin in 1997. And we'll put a link to that article because it also has an additional 36 questions that are a little bit lighter, that might be more like of a getting to know you sort of thing. At the end, I noticed that. But this was only really made popular back in 2015. So a couple decades after the study was done. You're rolling your eyes. Maybe you had heard of it, but I think broader public knowledge of it when it was written up in the New York Times in 2015. Mandy Len Catron wrote an article, "To Fall in Love with Anyone, Do This." And then people all over the place started doing these questions. And I think now it's become quite popular to do them.
Right.
And so as part of your course that you're taking right now on sexology, they had asked you to do these questions. So it was a nice reminder for us to, to try it out. And you did them twice. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, as you know, I have what I consider to be two partners. And I wanted to be able to, explore and get to know further both of you. You're one of them that I share it with, and my other partner. And it was interesting to see how we might match the styles, but also interesting for me as well to see if I varied my questions from once to another. It's kind of like when we do the attachment style, for example, how I might be, certain things I think are rather consistent, but certain things may fluctuate over time depending on your life circumstances, who you're with, things of that nature. But I think overall, you get a sense of who you are. And I think I was rather consistent in these questions.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I feel like you had a bit of practice. I was a bit more surprised by some of the questions, but you didn't do them all, right? You said maybe you didn't finish them all. So that was cool. So let's talk a bit about our experience doing it. And so we decided, I think when people say, oh, you should do these questions, you should have a quiet place, be comfortable, no distractions. But it was interesting. We actually did it on our drive back here to Montreal. We decided to take that time, which, sometimes we just talk or listen to music or podcasts to go through the questions. And I'm wondering what you think about in terms of like that sort of interaction. Was it easier to do that? Because, sometimes they say it's sometimes easier to share things that are personal if you're not forced to look the person in the eye. I don't know what you think about that.
Oh, that's interesting. I think the being on the highway like that, it doesn't demand a whole lot of attention. Of course, you have to be aware. You should not be distracted. But I think it was easy enough to have a conversation like that. And being next to each other did feel intimate. We often like to do stuff like that. I think that's one of our shared interests, is that we get off on these kind of mental gymnastics. We like these little intellectual exercises. And I think it was very easy and felt like a good space to do it. Maybe going for a drive is a very safe and secure place to go for, do things.
Yeah, or for a walk. And they say that it's supposed to take like 90 minutes to do it. We ended up splitting it up in 2, and I think it took us over 2 hours for sure to do it. But we had a lot to say, and I wonder if it would be different. Do you think it would be different if somebody didn't really know the person? Would they share the level of detail that maybe we did? I don't know.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And also I wonder if you are by nature somebody who talks a lot, are you going to really fill the page? Or if you're somebody who is a better listener, for example, would you be less likely to take up all that allotted time?
Yeah. So we're not going to go over all the 36 questions. And like I said, we will be giving you a link where you can get the download where we put the original 36 questions plus our own. But I thought just to go through some of them we can go through some of the original ones quickly. I'll share on screen our document, and hopefully this will work. There we go. Let me get rid of this tab. Okay. Here they are. Hopefully people can see that. So let me go bigger here. 125. Okay, perfect. So there's 3 sets in the original questions, and the idea is that they get a little bit more intense as you go, more intimate as you go along. And so, the first set covers things. Is there any ones that you want to cover? I like the first question, actually. Given the choice of anyone in the world, whom would you want as a dinner guest? And we had 2 very different answers. I liked the answer you gave about the second person that you thought.
Right.
So did you want to share that?
I said that I would want to invite Gandhi because I love his pacifist approach. He was able to bring the British Empire down to its knees without ever having fired a single shot, which was amazing. So he uses his intellect to find ways to empower himself and a nation, and it was very effective. And also the fact that he is vegan, like myself, so it would be easy to plan a dinner for him that way.
And my answer was actually a little bit closer to home. It was your mother, because she's been gone from us for about 2 or 3 years, and I really miss her, and it would be really lovely to have a dinner with her. And I think that you said that, would you want her to cook the dinner, or would you cook the dinner? And I was like, she was a really great cook, and she did know how to throw a dinner party.
She sure did.
So.
And then that made me want to modify my answer and say, yeah, of course, I would love to have my mom.
What would constitute a perfect day for you? We had some similar answers to that. Was there anything that surprised you actually anything in this first set, either that or other things? The secret hunch about how you'll die?
I think I had already known my answer even before this question was asked the first time, that I don't want to die at the office, as people say, behind the desk, although I love what I do. And I don't want to die in some mundane way, like being at a checkout counter or in traffic. I want to die by some extraordinary measure. I want to be eaten by a tiger, or the hot air balloon should suddenly fall out, or something extraordinary. So when they say, did you hear Andre died? And they're like, oh, what happened? And they say, well, the gorilla ate him or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and
they're vegan. So.
And I always thought that I would die in some traumatic way when I was young. But now that I've surpassed 50, maybe that's not going to come true. And then some of the other ones was fun. Take 4 minutes and tell your partner your life story in as much detail as possible. That was kind of a fun exercise to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if I learned something different about you from there, that thing, because I did know you quite well, and I think I knew part of that story, but it was interesting maybe to hear what you chose to put in the summary.
Mm-hmm. But that is part of the thing also, right? Is that these 36 questions, again, as you say, were to invite people that you just met or on a first date or strangers,
Yes.
and then you might not have known that. We've been speaking, and we talk a lot with each other for like 8+ years.
Yes.
So, you do get to become informed, unless you are really so private that you never share anything about yourself.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's
there was one, the other one, number 10. If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be? And I thought that was quite interesting, because for me, that might indicate something about our attachment styles.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I think I shared that while I probably argued with my parents at various points in my teenage years. It sort of formed the way I am, and I don't know if I would really change that much about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so set 2 was getting a bit more intensive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think. The greatest accomplishment of your life. I thought that was a really hard one for me, but I really loved your answer.
Oh, yeah.
Are you open to sharing that?
I sure am.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, you want me to share it now?
Yeah.
I thought you meant in theory, was I open to it? I would say that my greatest accomplishment was one that led to the next greatest accomplishment. So I will divulge that I was having issue with substance abuse and alcohol, and I had an intervention that saved my life, and I was able to achieve sobriety and maintain that. And then from there, I was able to really look at what I wanted to do with my life. And that's when I made the decision that I wanted to become a therapist. And then from there, it's allowed me to work with a great many people, and it's been extraordinary. So I thought that was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that answer.
Yeah.
What else did that one? They were all good. The crystal ball one could tell if a crystal could tell you the truth about yourself, your life, the future, or anything else. What would you want to know? I'm trying to remember how we answered that one.
For me, I don't want to know the future. I want to have this, whether it's true or not, I want to have this idea that I am self-determining, that I can influence what path I'm going to go into. And to already know the future would kind of take away the mystery. It's kind of like, would you watch the hockey game if you already knew the ending of it? Right? I like when it's live. But to know something about ourselves, in therapy, we invite ourselves to be introspective, but it's not always so easy. And sometimes try as we might have blind spots or resistance to it. We might be in some level of denial. And that's why it's good to kind of have another person that can reflect back to us, that can identify these things, that can point it out to us. But it's the willingness to show up and look at, well, who am I? What's going on in there? How could I improve my life or the lives around me?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I don't necessarily need to know the future. I think I might have said the greatest accomplishment in my life was not a single accomplishment. It's more that I continue to choose to listen to the universe and follow happiness in my life rather than a specific goal. I mean, I have health goals and that sort of thing, but more generally in terms of my career and that sort of thing is sort of following the joy in my life and in my personal life too, I think.
A life well led. I love that.
I think so.
I love that.
And then there was some questions in there about friendships. Also, how do you feel about your relationship with your mother?
That's a big one, right? About your mother, for sure.
So we had lots to share about that. But it's interesting they don't ask you about your relationship with your father.
Yeah. Well, maybe they're Freudian, always blame the mother. It always goes back to the mother.
Yeah. And then I liked the sharing of the 5 things about your partner that you liked. And we had a lot of things to share. And then set 3 was getting even more personal, I guess. And, I'm not sure what the difference is. Tell them what you like about them. Be very honest this time, saying things you might say to someone you first met versus things you like about them or you value in them.
I want to go back for just a second.
Yeah.
The 5 things that you might like about your partner, right? So that there's kind of already knowing that you know something about the person across from you that you're doing this with, right?
Okay.
So it might be harder on a first date, but those 5 positive characteristics reminds me of Gottman's idea of the 5 to 1, that we would have 5
yes.
positive things for every 1 negative thing. And that is often an indicator of whether or not our relationship is going to work out successfully. So do we then come to it naturally, or do we make a concerted effort to really look for the 5 positive things? So are we wanting to support the other person and see them succeed, our relationship succeed, or are we wanting to kind of have it fail? So I could easily, and in life in general, I could easily focus on the negative aspects of life and go around all grumpy and everything. Okay, fine, that's my right. Or I could choose to put on another pair of pants and say life is fantastic, and I focus on the positive. So I think gratitude is a big part of that. Am I able to look at the great things that I have in a relationship right now? It's not perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But can I really appreciate those other things in the person and hone in on those and appreciate them for that? Or do I make the assessment, and sometimes it's necessary, do I make the assessment and say, you know what, at the end of the day, maybe it's not that much. Maybe I'm wanting it more than it actually is sustainable. And
Maybe
there
the
aren't
balance
those
is off.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe come to that as well. But I think that if I am in it for the long run, if I am wanting to make the relationship, or maybe in the short run, if I'm wanting the relationship to be successful, am I able to look at that 5-1 ratio? Can I look at the positive characteristics of the other?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that applies also to how we look at ourselves. I think it's so easy to focus on the negative things in our life. And so that's something that I always encourage people to find is the positive things about ourselves, and focus on those things. Is so easy to focus on the negative. Where the focus goes, the energy flows, right? And so when we focus on those things, if we focus on things that are deficient in our relationship all the time, unless there's a reason for it, unless we should be paying attention to those things, then that's how we're going to feel in that relationship. So too in our life. And I was going to mention as well that in our courses and when I coach people, I actually developed an exercise called the I appreciate list. So I know when couples are having a difficult time, going through some difficult times, that sometimes we forget those things that we appreciate. So we created this list to help remind, and also something to look at when we're feeling jealous or things like that, if we're struggling with that in our relationships. So yeah.
You are an awesome coach. That is great. I love that. I love the reminder to not only look at our partner, but of ourselves. Hadn't even occurred to me. Yeah, those positive affirmations. Well, maybe it occurs, but it's good to have that reminder.
And then there was some other things in here which were interesting. This complete the sentence. I wish I had someone with whom I could share. I felt that one was for us, like reflecting on our relationship, was hard to say that I wish I had something, because I feel like I already can openly communicate and share things with you, even the uncomfortable things. And so that one I found difficult to answer.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were sharing the traits about each other that we appreciate, I think communication was tops for both of us.
It was.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
What was the other one under here? Oh, if you were to become a close friend with your partner. So more on friendship and what a friend looks like. And I would say, yeah, sometimes people don't become friends with our partner. But I think we are also friends, as well as lovers, as well as companions, as well as partners, like all those things.
But I wonder if that is phrased in a way that it's a given that we should, because often for me, I come across a lot of people who say, well, of course I want to be best friends with my partner. But some people, I think, want to keep a separation and say, well, no, I want to have other friends, other best friend outside of my relationship. I don't want my partner to be my best friend. And I think it's with the reason I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I don't, what happens, even if the relationship is good, but if they die or something, and now you've invested so much in this one person, but now you're left without them, and there's this big void. So I think a diversified portfolio is often a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that it's very important not to put all our eggs in one basket, into our partner basket, for sure. I think we need to have friends, and it's important to have that disentanglement.
It makes me think also, I might love my partner or partners, but do I like them? right? So after all these years, I recognize all these great things about them, but essentially, do I really like them? Would I hang out with them otherwise? Maybe not.
Yeah.
There was one also that I thought was kind of interesting is, when is the last time you cried in front of another person? I think for me, that is vulnerable in two ways. One is the ability to cry in front of somebody else, and then to admit it to another person and say, I was crying in front of this other person. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I did end up crying during this at one point. So.
And then I asked you, was that a tear of, like what were the tears signifying? What was the meaning of those tears? Right? Was it out of sadness, or was it appreciation? I mean, because we can cry and have it mean many different things.
Yeah, it wasn't because I shared something with you. It was because I was sad about that particular thing. So, and then in all people in your family, whose death would you find most disturbing? I consider you my family, and so I definitely that you would be, the person I think that I would have the hardest time with, and as well as probably my mom, of, my two parents. I feel bad saying that, but I feel like I have a closer relationship with her, and I would feel more of the void and emptiness, her loss. Maybe
that's a two-part question then, right? Because it could be your family of origin and your chosen family. Maybe you're allowed to choose too. Yeah.
That's true. Okay. So let me stop sharing, and then we'll just talk quickly about go back to the studio. Oh, there we are. Okay. All right. So we did that exercise, and, we weren't intending when we did the exercise to add more questions, but of course, as it does, it spawned a conversation with us, and we still had time on the drive. So we started thinking about other questions that, you would want to ask somebody, particularly if you're going to continue to invest time and energy in the relationship. And a lot of these things are things that I find come up when we speak to people, when we're coaching, or I imagine when you're in therapy with people, some of these things come up as issues people present in their relationships. So the idea, I think, is that the first set of questions is for maybe more early in your relationship, but it's kind of fun to do when you've been in the relationship for a while. And the idea is to help you to see if you can fall in love. But then these questions we put is the 36 questions you need to ask to stay in love or stay together with someone.
Or making big life changes like moving in together. So those 36 questions originally were quite fantastic, but some of the things that we realized that maybe aren't discussed so easily are things like money, sex, health, and personal habits, right? So in my practice, I see that people can talk about their love or hate for their mother, their sex lives with it, but talking about money is often a very difficult thing to bring up with people.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about that
with friends and partners and that sort of thing.
Yeah, sometimes even harder with partners.
And I think sometimes people, I don't know about you, but sometimes people think that these shouldn't be the issue. A lot of these things that we talk about in these other questions are things that shouldn't become like an issue in your relationship. You should be able to get over it, like whether or not somebody leaves their socks on the floor, or their shoes by the door, or that sort of thing. So shall we go? Let's just share the document, and then we'll go through the themes that way. Because we came up with how many themes? Can you scroll so I can 54? See the note? No. How many themes? 1, 2, 3. Oh, no. You're gone too far. So here's the themes that we went through. So health and safety, money and lifestyle, communication and conflict,
relationship intimacy, vulnerability, sex desires and kinks, habits and everyday stuff,
family and culture, and life experiences. And these aren't any particular order, but we just tried to group them in a way that was helpful. So let's go into it. I'll present the screen again. Share screen. Okay. All right. Okay. So these we called the other 36 questions, and we won't go through all of these, but we can go over the main topics. So health and safety. So some of the things that we saw that we thought were missing were around regular STI testing and talking about this with a partner.
That's something that I pretty much do now on a first date, or even before meeting the person, going on a date. I want to know where they are with that and what's their comfort level about speaking about that. But it's so interesting to see how it's changed over time for me, because in the very beginning, when I thought about bringing up STI testing, my initial thought was, well, are they going to think that I'm some kind of perv, or that I'm, having so much sex that it's like, I need to know on a daily basis, a checkup or whatever. But really, for me, it is the consideration of my health and the health of others and the people in the community, and also our ability to talk about and say everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when you first get to know someone, this might not be something you feel comfortable talking about. So it would be interesting to find out if somebody is comfortable with it. So other questions relate to relationship with drugs, alcohol, and other substances and addiction, and understanding if that has been a situation for them, but also, how you deal with them.
Yeah. And it's interesting to bring up that conversation, because, how do I feel about disclosing it, or how do I feel it's going to be received by the other person, and how am I feeling as the receiver of that information?
Yeah. Yeah, I know when you told me, you asked me if it was a problem for me, because I do have alcohol on occasion. I'm not a huge drinker, but but for some people who have struggled with addiction, they cannot be they find it hard when people have alcohol, depending on what, how far they are in their journey, or just their own personal preferences around that.
Well, I went out with somebody, we had a good text relationship back and forth. And then when I didn't at this time disclose that I was not drinking. And then when we went out, they ordered a drink, and I ordered a non-alcoholic drink. And they said, "What, you don't drink?" And I said, "No, but it's fine if you do." And they said, "Oh no, I'm sorry, but like, I want to be able to enjoy a glass of wine, a bottle of wine with somebody, and not just watch, have them watch me drink it." And that's well within their rights, but they needed to know that information.
So that was good to know early on.
Yeah.
So we talk about mental health and family history, and how comfortable you feel disclosing health challenges or past trauma to a new partner. And then this one is thoughts on firearms in the home. And depending on what country you live in, they may or may not be permitted in the home, or certain types of firearms. Does it affect your sense of safety?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's one particular safety topic, but might be something that's relevant for people. I certainly have feelings about it.
Yeah, and a lot of people have very strong feelings about it. It can be very polarizing, right? So, and do we? What if it never comes up in conversation, and then the day that you're moving in, you see the gun box arriving, like, wow, like I didn't know. Or you move in, and as you're putting your stuff in the closet, you come across their firearms, like, wow, I didn't know that was in the house. Maybe it's a good thing to know about going into it. Or do you imagine that it would come up naturally in conversation?
I don't think it might not. If you hadn't been to the person or with the person, or you hadn't talked about things, it might not come up.
No, it might not. Yeah.
And
But also, maybe you come to find out their reason behind it, and it might make sense. Maybe it does differ from yours, but you might be able to appreciate their side to it. But would it be enough of a deal breaker for you?
Yeah. And then we get into the money and lifestyle questions. And I think we had a lot to say on this. It was hard to keep this to a limited group, but I think it's because it is a difficult thing to talk about. Everybody has their own money story. Yeah. And so the first question is around your relationship with money. Do you save, spend, budget, invest, or avoid dealing or talking about money altogether? And do you feel comfortable sharing your financial status with a partner, including your debts and your savings?
Sure. And do you have a right to know about their stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, if you are starting this future with the person, do you want to know who you're going in with?
Yeah. How do you feel about debt? And is there such a thing as good debt or bad debt for you, right? How do you imagine managing money in your relationship? Would you prefer merging finances, staying separate, or something in between? That can be something that's important to maintain. Some people really want to maintain their own finances, while others think that you should just merge and just let it happen. I mean, I've been in both situations. I think in our situation, we sort of keep our own finances, but we also share things. And I don't know, we don't really get caught up in it.
Have we really had much in the way of conversation around finance?
We have it from time to time. Maybe it's time to have more conversation about it.
Maybe we should.
Every once in a while we do. We talk about, like when we went on our trip to Turkey, for example, we talked about how we would divide, like we divided some of the things evenly, the the flights and the hotels and all that stuff. But then all the extra stuff that we didn't include when we divided it up with our friend, like food and groceries and that sort of thing, we sort of had a conversation and we said, do we need to divide it up evenly? Do we need to do the calculation? And I think we both agreed that it wasn't important.
Right. But then also the idea of gender role comes into money too, right? So are we wanting to redefine gender roles, or do we fall into traditional? Are we more comfortable with traditional gender roles when it comes to paying for things, receiving all those things? Yeah. But it's good to have the conversations perhaps up front before they happen to manage your expectations. And as we always say, information is power. So you get to consent to it or decline it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the last several questions in this have to do with how you divide up expenses and domestic chores. What happens if one person earns more than you? Do you still split expenses 50-50 or do you do it according to income? And what if one person does more of the household things? Does that have value, et cetera, et cetera? So those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
This might get uncomfortable. And I know for sure it has. I mean, I've worked with couples that had this situation where the one person felt they had to have multiple jobs to pay for things in the household. And then when their partner had some extra cash, they would spend it on things just for themselves. And they had some resentment around that. So those kinds of things can cause issues in the relationship.
I wonder if those issues, if that potential resentment could have been avoided or minimized had we had the conversation before going into it. Yeah. But it's interesting, right? So do you do that on a first date and say, oh, by the way, where are you with this? When do you start to feel comfortable about it? It makes me think back to the idea of crossing the threshold, right? So we might feel that we go out to a party, for example, and I have this kind of character where I talk a lot and I talk really loud, for example. And if we're on a first date, you probably don't, or I'll assume that you might not imagine that my behavior reflects upon you. You are a person, I'm a person. But then at one point through all that dating, we kind of become a we. And now all of a sudden, my behavior could reflect upon you, the way we imagine other people are seeing us. And we cross that threshold. Now, do you suddenly feel, well, I want to reel them in a little bit. I don't want them talking that way. And do I ever get the right to announce that and say, well, hey, you're being too much this or too much that? We would never say that on the first date. I can't imagine saying it on the first date.
No, but it's things to pay attention to, right? We typically ignore some things that tend to cause us grief later on in a relationship.
Well, it's uncomfortable, right? So we want to shy away from it. We're hoping it'll kind of resolve itself or we minimize it or whatever. But what's going to happen later on? So then if I am off in that way, how could I ever receive that? How could I ever be open to it and become more mindful of it?
Yeah. So that's some of the questions. Good segue, Andre, as usual, for the communication and conflict. So the first question's about disagreements. And when you resolve them, do you take breaks? Do you, what do you do? Don't go to bed angry, that idea. And then the second one is how would you want a partner to let you know if something felt off? And how would you want them to tell you? And how would you like to tell them?
Right. So a couple of things come to mind. The one about recognizing that something might be off, we go back to this idea of HALT, right? Being hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And, when you are activated in one of these things, you're maybe not the most receptive to be told that you might be halting, right? So it's like when I'm excited and you say, hey, relax. I was like, that's the last thing I want to hear, right? But if we have already the awareness that HALT does exist, that we're all prone to it, then maybe I'm able to say, oh yeah, okay, maybe I need a Snickers bar, right? But the idea of, do we stay up and we talk things out? Or do we avoid going to bed angry? My grandparents always said, don't go to bed angry. But there is a lot of empirical evidence to support the idea that, and we know from our own personal experience, that staying up at 11:30 at night to hash things out when we are tired, maybe not the best idea, right? So if we do adjourn, then we have this agreement, well, okay, we will find another time to come back to this and talk about it.
Yeah, and I would suggest that you find a specific time or agree when you're going to come back to it.
If you can.
If you can, yes. Yeah. And then how do you prefer to be supported? So that's under communication and conflict. And then relationships, intimacy, and vulnerability. There's a lot in this section. We talk about relationship styles, love language, attachment style. I actually spoke to someone on the phone on a call recently, and they were talking about now, given their past experience now, that's one of the first things they ask is, do you know what your attachment style is? And then things around sex and intimacy are here. So, and then cheating. Have you ever cheated? That's kind of an interesting question. In school, in a job, in a relationship, and have you ever been cheated on?
Right.
And then there was and then that led into the section on sex, desire, and kinks. I like this question. You were talking about how your sexuality has evolved over the years. So how you identify sexually, how you express sexually, and your level of desire. And you said something about sexuality, your identity versus your expression.
Yeah. So your expression is how you go to bed with somebody else, and your identity is how you go to bed with yourself.
Okay.
Right. So how do you identify and how do you relate?
And there's some stuff in there about yummy fantasies or things that are a turnoff, a yuck, or a hard limit for you in the bedroom. How do you express when you're in the mood? What are your thoughts?
Or when you're not.
When you're not. What are your thoughts on porn, toys, solo pleasure, and fantasy in a relationship? That's another thing that can sometimes get people caught up.
Yeah. And there's so much to say about that, right? Like, I mean, porn, are we talking about commercial porn? Are we talking about ethical porn? You know, I mean, is it, female directed porn? Is it, and maybe it sounds a little bit generalizing, but most guys are more visual. So they might want that as a thing. And is it okay? And let's say on the other side of the visual of it, well, what if I close my eyes and I fantasize about somebody else? Is that, if I'm running the porn in my head, is that permissible or not? And then do we get into thought? Please, anyway, there's a whole bunch to unpack there.
Yeah. And then we get into habits, values, and some of the everyday stuff. So are you a morning person or a late night owl? Do you like breakfast? Do you make your bed every day? That can be a source of contention with people.
Do you leave your socks on the floor?
Do you leave your socks on the floor? Do you change your underwear and socks daily? That was yours.
No, seriously.
And how pets in the bedroom or sharing your space with pets. Like some people are allergic. Some people do not want pets.
And some people absolutely, like those are my little babies.
That's a requirement.
They sleep with me. Yeah.
And leisure time, how you spend your leisure time. And then the last,
I want to stop on that for a second. How do you spend your leisure time? Okay. So when we're not working, do I just want to come home and watch rom-coms? I've had a hard day. It's my thing. That's fine. But do I do that all the time? And are we both on board with it? Is that our thing? Or maybe I want to be more active, but maybe that would be a good thing to know before going in together. Right. So, because I think a lot of it is based initially on attraction, right? That chemical signature that's there. And we're like, wow, I can't get enough of this person. But then what's beyond that? What's after that? And will we actually be compatible in that way, right? And what happens? Maybe it's okay for me to be on the couch while you're out doing your thing. Or maybe it's like, well, I don't like that. I find it's just a mismatch. And I want somebody that can be on the couch with me, or I want somebody who's going to go on these book club meetings with me, or whatever it might be.
I think this one's tricky, especially when you first meet someone, because, when you first meet someone, you're probably your leisure time. If you're together, you're doing fun things, you're planning dates and stuff like that. But when we've been with someone for a long time, in particular, I hear this all the time. Again, people who are non-monogamous relationships say they're nesting with someone, but they have other partners. They may, plan dates for those other partners, but then you're the one that they sit and watch TV with, go to, sit and watch TV on the couch and cuddle with, and you're not planning those extra things. So it's important to know what's important to you in terms of leisure time and how you might want to continue some of those connections. So
yeah, good point.
Yes. And gas or other bodily functions, super important.
It happens. Family,
culture, and traditions. So how important is it to spend time with your family and your partner's family? And do you like to celebrate holidays? And what traditions matter to you? That can be important, because I know we have a different consideration of that.
Very different. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting. So will I just participate in your family things because I know it's important to you? Or are you able to appreciate that it's not my jam, and then
Mm-hmm.
you go to it and feel well about it, or do you feel as though, well, how come I'm always going to these things alone?
Mm-hmm. How do I feel? How do you?
I think that you want to support my position, but I think that over time you do feel like you are not really loving always flying solo in it.
That is true.
Mm.
That is true. But you do make some efforts. But part of that is the situation.
Yeah.
When we came out as non-monogamous, which influenced that as well.
But even before that, family gatherings, yeah, I've got some history there. But we know about these things because we've talked about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then life experience and growth. There's like a million things you can include under here, but we put this one in. How important is travel to you? Would you like to travel with your partner or without your partner?
We love travel so much. I think that I assume that everybody loves to travel, but I come to find out not everybody loves to travel.
No. And then the final one, have you ever lived on your own or with others other than family? And what was your experience with that? Would you want to live with a partner? Because some people, that's another one, is maybe they never want to live full time with a partner. And I think we came to that conclusion, and we still have two places. We do like to nest together, but not 100% of the time.
Right. Unless we're traveling.
But I wanted
to,
traveling is the change, is the difference.
But I came up with this question because I wanted to know, would it mean anything to me if the person I want to live with had never lived outside of their family of origin? Does it inform me in any way? So do they know how to do things that their parents might have done for them? Do they know how to, navigate potentially difficult domestic situations? How are we going to go about it?
Yeah. Or if they've never lived on their own, that can be another factor, because like if you've never lived on your own, maybe you don't know what it takes to live on your own, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So have you lived with other people and been able to navigate that? Have you been able to live on your own and take care of everything yourself without someone else doing it?
Meal planning, budgeting, passing the vacuum, whatever, passing the Hoover. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that was our additional 36 questions. Like we said, we'll put in the show notes a link so that you can download the full list of the original 36 and our new 36. But we'd love to know if you've done these and when you do them, and if we missed any.
Yeah, let us know.
Do them, and please put your comments in the podcast. You can also share them in our Let's Talk Polyamory private Facebook group. And do them with a partner, a friend.
Or partners.
Okay. A new connection. Give yourself time, create space to do this. And, you may need to take some breaks in it. So, 36 questions that may lead to love, and the 36 questions that you need to ask to stay in love.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's the podcast today. Thanks for listening. Reach out to us anytime and check out the show notes for all the information we shared today.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.